Hello, hello, and welcome to Story Elixir. We're continuing our story analysis series of Persona 5. If you haven't watched the others, I recommend going back to those first before watching this video. The playlist is in the top corner. Let's start with a check-in of our characters. In this arc, they continue to sexualize An in the same ways that I talked about last time, so I'm going to put a counter on screen representing how many arcs she's sexualized in, so I don't have to say they mistreat her over and over and over. So far, we're at 3 of 7. Deal. Like in the previous arc, the bigger change happens to Ryuji. They return to him being an angry delinquent like in the first arc, but now they've removed him needing a just cause to be angry about. It's not about getting back against oppressive people. Now he's just mad, unreasonably mad about anything that irritates him. The main reason for this is because our main character, is a mostly silent protagonist, and it's difficult for a silent protagonist to also be an active character, because usually they are embodied by the player, who is assumed to be going through this for the very first time and doesn't know what's going to happen. If you'd like a detailed explanation of that concept, I have another video about active characters versus passive characters, also in the top corner. However, stories need things to happen to progress. Plot has to happen. So a character needs to be active for that to happen. The writers have clearly chosen Ryuji for this role, considering how much they twist him into knots, but they do it to force plot progression to happen, rather than, okay, we have this character with this established personality, how would this character naturally allow for the plot to happen? They don't do that. They tie him into knots to force the issue. Good writing either adjusts the plot to fit the characters, like I just said, or they create characters in the outlining and planning phase of writing, so before you actually put pen to paper, that will naturally allow the plot to flow in a way that you want it to. You make the plot first, and then you make the characters fit that narrative. They do neither of these things in Persona 5. They also continue to escalate the antagonistic relationship between Ryuji and Morgana. Now, Ryuji will just call Morgana useless, completely unprompted, which never fails to make him look like an ass. He's just being a dick, for no reason. This is still for a later arc, about 2 arcs from now, so we'll deal with that when we get there. But it continues to make Ryuji less and less likable. A lot of people around this arc start to really not like Ryuji. With all this in mind, I will be jumping around quite a bit in this arc again, because we're looking at about 3 different plot lines, all happening kind of simultaneously. So we're going to be talking about them in chunks, rather than the linear way that I talked about the Madarame arc, because we might get multiple scenes back to back that are dealing with different plot lines. But I will start with the plot and kind of come back to it as a foundation layer, basically. So, we start in the aftermath of Madarame's change of heart. It serves a couple of functions. The first is a check-in of all the plot that just happened, because we just went through 2 arcs, and the characters' various motivations that are still not quite aligned. It's just kind of doing a check-in of, hey, these guys are mostly aligned, but not quite. The second function is to introduce the idea that their actions could be considered, like, suspicious in universe, while Ryuji himself is not prioritizing secrecy at all. We have the attendance officers questioning them and what they're doing, and we're reminded that Makoto is still snooping around because Madarame is handled. We're back to Makoto. And while we're on the topic of Makoto, let's talk about her a little bit. Throughout this arc, we get many scenes between Makoto and Sai. I want to remind people what the framing device for this story is. This is a story within a story as a structure, and it's a conversation between our main character and Sai Nijima in the interrogation room. Most of the story the player is experiencing at this point in the story happened in the past, months ago. That means that functionally, the only characters that really matter and can actually change the story as it exists are the main character, Sai, and the main antagonist. As Sai's sister, Makoto's role in the narrative during this arc is mostly to have scenes either with Sai or about Sai, so the player can learn more about her. We need more about this character that has such an importance to the narrative outside of this story within a story. A lot of this arc is devoted to learning about Sae. Does Makoto also have an arc in which she grapples with feelings of helplessness and the growing feeling that she should be prioritizing her own ideals and beliefs over getting into a good college and possibly just going into being an office worker? Yes, absolutely. But we get so many scenes of Sae and Makoto together and interacting. We get scenes where Sae is at her job. We know that the principal has been using Sae's capabilities to motivate and coerce Makoto into investigating for him. And Kaneshiro's goal is to get to Sae through Makoto. How he plans to do that, don't know. But that is his stated goal. So, what do we learn about Sae? Primarily, we learn the depth and the scale of her ambitions. She's looking to get ahead in Japan as a woman. The glass ceiling does exist across the world. The glass ceiling is the concept that there's only so far you can progress in your job as a woman, either through promotions or through raises or something like that. It's very clearly there in Japan. It's a very conservative country. Sae's entire story is about how she's trying to break through that glass ceiling. She wants to be as successful as the men around her. We get a scene between her and her boss during this arc in which she's trying to investigate the psychotic breakdowns and the Phantom Thieves, and the SIU director warns her that doing so will make her many enemies. She's overreaching here, and even her own boss is saying that they have to get rid of her once she leaves the scene, once she, leaves his office. And once Kaneshiro is defeated and arrested, she's upset that he turned himself in. She was investigating Kaneshiro, and his confession prevented her from getting a promotion because no one can take credit for it now. So the writers are telling us that she cared more about being the person to catch him than about his really shitty and abhorrent behavior actually being stopped. She wanted the credit. She didn't want to do the right thing. On top of that, we also learn that deep down, she sees Makoto as a shackle preventing her from advancing as much as she'd like. Her father died just as she was beginning to be independent, leaving her with a younger sibling to take care of. No matter how much she may want to not see it that way, she sees Makoto as a drain on her finances and is not useful to her until she graduates from a prestigious college. So there's a lot of misplaced resentment there. However, she does show remorse and apologizes when she says this aloud during the arc. So she does know that what she's feeling is not okay. We're looking at a flawed person here, not an evil one. And speaking of our prosecutor, back to the plot, we do get another scene in the interrogation room, because again, they always remind us of this framing device as we go along. The game tells us that the main character has not named Yusuke. We just talked about the Madarame arc, and yet Sae refers to him as Madarame's pupil, and has to threaten the main character and say that an investigation would reveal who this pupil was. This means she doesn't already know who he was. She has to look for it. She has to investigate to get this information. And the player is still not allowed to tell her. We never confirm what she knows. We don't ever go, oh yeah, that's Yusuke. No, our character says, you can do that. Go forth, investigate. We also get the basic details of our next target, and they tell us it's a mafia boss. So all of the moral ambiguity of the last two arcs is completely gone here. It's a known criminal in the underbelly of the city. No one is going to ask the player to sympathize with this target. And the characters don't try to either. While I'm here, I want to stress why looking at what options the player does not have during those moments where we're allowed to choose an option is so important. In a situation like this, where the main character is a mostly silent protagonist, the player and the writers are sharing this main character. This is unique to video games. The writers have a story they want to tell, and the story needs a character with specific personality traits. But the player is the one embodying this character, and they want to have some agency when it comes to how this character behaves, so the player is given options. This means that the player is allowed to adjust the severity of certain personality traits, but they're usually not allowed to pull the character completely out of character. Or if they do, it's usually tied to some kind of morality bar, going in the background. So looking at what this character cannot be, helps the player get a baseline for what he can be. For example, the player cannot sell out the main character's friends during these last two arcs. The main character only gives Sai vague descriptions so he can talk about the events that happened. We did this with Madarame's pupil. I teamed up with 2 Shujin students to do this kind of thing. That means this character cannot only be in it for himself, nor does he want to make a deal. He can't do those things because the player can't do those things. The only thing that this character can do is take the fall solo and protect his allies, which means we're given so much of his personality through the options that we have and do not have. So with these kinds of protagonists in which we do share responsibility for this character, it's always worth looking at what we can say and what we cannot say. Anyway, back to the main story. My tangent is over. We're getting scenes throughout the first half of this arc where the principal is pressuring Makoto to give him results, give him names of the Phantom Thieves. He's putting up notices without her knowledge in an attempt to get students to kind of feed her useful information. And when she pushes back against him, or if she brings up the issue about students getting extorted for money, he dodges all responsibility and basically tells Makoto that she's on her own. She has to resolve the problems without him, but he wants results from her, which means Makoto is being crushed under the weight of all of that because it's literally an extortion ring and it's an internal investigation inside of the school that's being handled by one person. That's a lot. That's a lot. Also, during this first half, she's taken a lot of personal blows in which people insult her or yell at her for basically just not being good enough. She's called a goody two-shoes. She's called a burden. She's called useless a couple of times. All of the students are beginning to have rumors about her. They're looking to her for guidance and help that she just can't provide because she doesn't have enough weight to throw. You know, a bunch of this stuff. This situation is the perfect storm for her to have character development. Her established character from the last arc is that she behaves, gets good grades, listens to her elders. She's a good student. However, what if we put her in a situation that can't be solved by being good in the eyes of the principal or her sister? And we know throughout this arc, she wants to do the right thing. She cares about the concept of justice. So when we put her in a situation where her established personality can't fix the problem, what's really cool is to watch what values does she stick to and which ones does she bend or break. This is how you can change an established character within a story. This is how you create believable character arcs that make sense. This is how you do it. This is good. This is very good. I wish they would do this more. Speaking of things that make sense, the artificial conflict between An and Makoto doesn't. Yes, Makoto has annoyed the party. She's opposed to them. She is a minor antagonist during this arc. But the conflict between her and An specifically is primarily because An hears a rumor that Makoto knew about Kamoshida's actions and assisted in the cover-up. Not only has Makoto outright said that she didn't know when confronted about this, but it also doesn't make sense for An to believe the rumors in the first place. As part of her backstory, An was the victim of rumors because of her looks. She's half foreigner. She was also the victim of a rumor that Kamoshida was spreading, saying that they were in a romantic relationship. It's extremely unlikely that An, of every character we have access to, would believe a rumor at face value without any effort to check the validity of those rumors. Like, I can see her going to check on it to see, or I can see her just going, rumors are false, there's no way that's true, and move on. Either way, how An would believably act is to not have this artificial conflict between her and Makoto. It wouldn't happen. The character that is more likely to believe rumors is Ryuji. He has more reason to dislike Makoto generally because she's been snooping around and he's got a bit of an anger problem, and he generally listens to rumors by default. He usually brings up rumors when discussing things. He's the one that listens to it. So they could have just switched who heard the rumor. It would have been a more believable conflict rather than going for the cat fight that, is two girls going at it. Anyway, Back to the plot. The group goes to a TV station as part of a school trip, and there's a couple of important scenes here. The first and most obvious is just how mad and how loud Ryuji is in this arc. This is where his shiny new personality is showcased, and it is a lot. He is yelling. He is angry. He's dealing with cables and is just having a meltdown. I've talked about this already, so we're just gonna leave it there and move on to major spoiler territory. If you're following along as part of a first playthrough or something, I recommend skipping ahead to this timestamp if you want to figure it out yourself. Okay, we good? Good. In the scene where our character meets Akechi, there are some key details that should be noted. 1, our character has no lines of dialogue. We don't get any options. There's no movement on screen to show that he might be talking. None of it. 2, the conversation is between Morgana, An, and Ryuji, 3 individuals. Then Morgana goes into our bag and out of sight before Akechi comes into frame. And 3, once Akechi is there, he then takes Morgana's now empty spot in the conversation. Our character is still not talking in this conversation. That does not change between Morgana being in the scene and Akechi being in the scene. This is a normal conversation flow in fiction because a conversation in the real world can only comfortably accommodate maybe 3 people, 3, maybe 4. Once more people are added, it's common for people to either talk over each other or for some members of like a conversation group to kind of go unheard due to there just not being enough space for them. Everyone else is talking, they take a step back and they stop talking. This flow is very natural, and it means that Akechi did not see Morgana. He saw 3 individuals, made an assumption about who was talking, and then nothing in the conversation following his arrival contradicted his assumption. So, during the conversation, Akechi says that he specifically heard the word pancake. This is notable because the only character to use that word in the conversation before his arrival was Morgana. We know from multiple scenes, they've done it a couple of times now, as like a joke, that he sounds like a normal cat to anyone who has not gone to the metaverse and has heard him talking. Without doing that, they have no way to cognitively interpret his meows as words. They just hear meows. The player should notice right away that Akechi has, at minimum, been to the metaverse before and has likely either heard or seen Morgana there and heard him talking. You could also infer that he may be following the group at this part of the plot, but there's no evidence of that in the game itself. When I noticed this on my first playthrough, I immediately connected him to the guy in the black mask that Madarame had mentioned before, because the guy was mentioned, like that black mask character was introduced, and then we run into somebody who has the skill set needed to be that specific individual. But there's no direct evidence at this time of that either. It's just a thing that Atlas usually does. They usually present like a mystery, like who could this be? And then you get somebody very soon afterwards that exactly slots into that missing character role. Like they do that all the time. And so you kind of get used to a writing team style over time. So I went, okay, this is a mystery person. Then they give me a new person that has the exact skill set I need. It's probably this guy. But there's no actual evidence of that. Regardless, this should signal to the player that this Akechi guy is a lot more than he appears, and when paired with his apparent dislike of the Phantom Thieves, should not be trusted. Alright, spoilers over, back to the main plot. The TV interview the next day is the other important scene in this section. It officially introduces the thematic idea that the methods used by the Phantom Thieves could be used to evil ends. It also asks the question of whether the Phantom Thieves are right for coercing confessions from their victims using supernatural means. Basically, they're circumventing the law and due process. I would find this question more compelling if the targets themselves were less obviously awful. In their attempts during the various arcs to make the targets appear worthy of getting their heart stolen, they have also made this question morally simple. I'm not about to question the morality of making a sex offender confess that they were a sex offender. I'm also not going to question the morality of punishing a guy who literally let someone die before their eyes to steal that person's artwork. We don't even physically harm them in any way, nor are they mentally unsound once we change their heart. So that thematic question is a miss for me because the answer is too easy. Of course we're right. It doesn't matter how we did it. 1, we didn't even hurt them, so we have done nothing morally wrong in the process. And 2, they're awful people. The next important scene in this arc is the next confrontation with Makoto, and they show us that she is now gathering physical evidence about the group at this point. She's introduced into the scene by taking a photo. This is mere minutes after Ryuji loudly says that they're the Phantom Thieves. He's yelling here. So the player should know we're caught just immediately. Now, the game does confirm it a little later, but the player should be like, oh no. As I mentioned before, Ryuji is the active character that moves the plot forward most of the time. But this is the first time that the writers have made that a bad thing, has made it something for us to blame him for. To kind of explain what I'm talking about, let's look back at the other arcs again, just as a quick refresher. In the Kaneshiro arc, Ryuji is the one that wants to investigate the castle palace, to get back at Kaneshiro for ruining his future as a track star and breaking his leg. He is the reason why we go back there. He's also the main reason why An enters the palace alone, so that she can be caught and then saved and brought into the group. He upsets her and says she can't go, then throws her out, and then she comes back in by herself. So he's the reason why that happens. During the aftermath of that arc, and we talked about this in the last video, Ryuji is the one that wants to continue being Phantom Thieves. He's the one that suggests the idea to continue. And during the Madarame arc, he's the main guy getting information about Madarame and kind of moving the group closer to changing his heart. All of this is pretty logical and generally believable, even though they do have to tweak him a little to have him seek out Madarame that way. None of this is truly detrimental to the group as a whole. That is not the case here. Ryuji is actively yelling on school grounds about being Phantom Thieves when they know the student council president is actively investigating them. He is the reason the group is caught by her, and it's irritating because it doesn't make sense. Even if he is stupid, it doesn't make sense. He has to be truly a moron to make this kind of mistake. This, combined with his personality leaning towards being an ass, with him just being a dick to Morgana for no reason, because again, he's now doing it unprompted, just tanks how likable he is as a character. He's just an ass and an idiot. And there's no reason to make him this way. Now, the game does try to rope An into taking the blame for this as well, but she's a passive character in this scene. She's reacting to Ryuji's outburst. He is the reason why the conversation happens, so she wouldn't have said incriminating things if Ryuji wasn't yelling about it. To bring back my point about how plot should be adjusted to fit characters, let's look at how this could have been adjusted while keeping everyone mostly in character. Say we want for this arc to resolve this way. We want Makoto to still catch them for being Phantom Thieves, confront them, and for her to still grapple with the morality of what she's doing, because that's all working as intended. That's working just fine. We don't want to mess with the things that are working. What we could do is change the confrontation scene in the Madarame arc, that one where she was an idiot and doesn't make any sense, to a scene in which she's gathering recordings and photos in a way that doesn't let the Phantom Thieves know that she's investigating. That way, even if the Phantom Thieves were attempting to not get caught and being stealthy and moving around and generally trying their best to not be suspicious, she would still have a recording of the group to use as evidence. She wouldn't have had to be pulled out of being a smart character, and Ryuji wouldn't have to be tied into unrecognizable knots in this arc. When this confrontation happens in the Kaneshiro arc, all you have to do is switch who hears the rumor to Ryuji and have An support him in the conversation instead. They already do that together here. They support each other. It's just An is the main antagonist to Makoto here, and Ryuji supports her. Just switch them, which means this confrontation still works, and the confrontation in the Madarame arc would now be switched out to something that is more believable. The main plot would still work. The things the Phantom Thieves collectively say to Makoto would still hit all of her same insecurities, and characters wouldn't need adjustments to accomplish it. Everybody would get to stay pretty much in character. It could even still be Ryuji's fault that they are caught, but if he's at least trying to be stealthy and just happens to be the loudest person we've got, then he's not as much to blame as he is in the scene that we actually got. But let's move ahead a little bit. During the scenes celebrating Madarame's change of heart, we get a flashback into the main character's backstory to get a little extra information on why he's here. because we know that he was sued and we know that he got a criminal record because of what happened, but nothing too detailed. And if it wasn't obvious who the main antagonist was in the previous arc, it certainly is now, because we have his character model, we have his portrait, it's exactly the same. We now know that this dude is the reason why we got sued and have a criminal record. Like, this is no longer spoiler territory. They also do a clever thing with Yusuke in these scenes by making him awful at keeping money, to further contrast him with his former mentor and kind of push that thematic question even after the arc has ended, even if only a little bit. Just a nice little touch. I like it a lot. But moving on, I really like the scene between Makoto and Akechi during this arc. Like I mentioned in the previous video, these two are being set up as foils for each other. In this arc, Makoto is having major doubts about whether she's on the right side, whether she agrees with the Phantom Thieves, what she should do, what's justice. And by contrast, Akechi is extremely sure about what he believes in, what his position is. He's confident in his stance against the Phantom Thieves. And this scene highlights a lot of that contrast really nicely. I like it a lot. Even if the actual wording is a little awkward, I'm gonna chalk it up to localization just because it seems to be working in any other way. I like it a lot no matter what. I also really like the scenes in which Makoto corners the group and makes them work for her because she actually gets to be smart. This is nice because we've been told that she is, but everything on screen has been largely how dumb she's being. So it's nice to actually see, no, this is a smart character. She's intended to be smart. In addition, the tasks she sets before the group reflects her internal struggle. By having them pursue a section of the mafia that is explicitly targeting high school students and potentially ruining their futures without even a name to go from, she set up a difficult challenge for the group that they may not want to meet. However, if they don't, Makoto will be secure in the knowledge that the group is just pretending to be just and heroes while only going after, the easy targets. But if they succeed, then they do care about solving the injustices before them, no matter how difficult it may be. No matter which outcome, she has her answer. And that's what she needs right now. That's the resolution of her arc right there. I'm still not a fan of how they got to these scenes, but it'll continue to happen, so I'll leave it there for now. I also just really like how upset Sayai gets about Makoto's involvement. Of course, she'd instantly know who Shujin's student council president was and what the implications of that are. She's so mad at you this arc. She is extremely upset, and it's so good. A little later on, we get a scene with Yusuke about his artistic struggles to set up his confidant, but it also continues the thematic thread from last arc. The entire point of that arc was the thematic question of how important wealth should be to an artist. Obviously, Madarame was the extreme by pursuing wealth at all costs and by taking from other people, especially children, but an artist does need to pay bills just like any other profession. And there's a good argument to be made that Yusuke is the other extreme of that argument at this point in the story. He's truly abysmal with money. He never has enough, he can't afford to pay for things, so on and so forth. And he genuinely believes that artists should only make art for the joy of it, for the passion of creating art. He also seems to believe that using art to sustain his living situation and to preserve his scholarship is somehow corrupting his art or making his art worse or, so on and so forth. So pursuing this question past its original arc allows the writers to explore that specific concept more thoroughly. So it's nice to see. I wish they would do it in the main story more often. I don't think they do it enough, but it's nice. I like seeing it a little bit. Now, remember when I just called Makoto smart? Turns out it was a fluke because she's back to making dumb decisions when confronting the mafia guy while we're investigating Shibuya. I'm pretty sure they yank characters around and tie them into knots in this arc more than any other. I may fix that in a later video, but for now, that's my instinct is to say this is the arc in which they do this the most. But we do get the payoff from the reporter that was given to us in the last arc, which works, I like it. And they give us a scene where they joke that two gay men are trying to get with Ryuji. I'm gonna go off the rails a little bit and talk, too real for just a second. It's not okay to portray members of the LGBT+ community as pedophiles or sex offenders, even as a joke like here. Doing so spreads deeply harmful misinformation that puts individual people in danger because people believe this. And people in that community are more often fetishized or are the victims of sexual crimes. It's not okay to do this. It's not okay. It's just not. Anyway, back to the story. So we get more scenes in which Makoto is triggered and then she does something stupid. Now, you might be tempted to think that I'm about to call this bad because I've been calling it bad. But no, this is fantastic. What makes this different is that the player can clearly see her reasons for why she's acting like this. This is the direct result of all the pressure that's been accumulating all this time. This is the direct result of people calling her useless, calling her a burden, telling her she's not good enough, telling her that she's just a goody two-shoes that can't actually get things done. This is the direct result of all that. So she's being reckless. So she's making dumb decisions. This is believable, where the other instances of her acting out of character are not. Yes, creating a story is partially about putting your characters into situations and seeing how they'll react and change, like I mentioned earlier. But this needs to be done with intention, or it's just a mess. It's just not believable. This is done very intentionally. This is good. I like this. Do this more. Because let's go back to how we got here. To get here, they artificially made the dynamic between the thieves and Makoto more antagonistic than it normally would be, because they made Makoto act dumb in the last arc. They fabricated a catfight out of nearly nothing that I've already said was not believable, and Ryuji was cranked up to 11 on the worst possible interpretation of his personality. Instead of that, they could have taken the time in the planning stages to accomplish this exact plot with the same characters without having to do all of that. Imagine what this could have been instead. It could have been a true cat and mouse situation between our group and this really smart Makoto. Ryuji could have been a favorite instead of an idiot asshole. It just hurts. Because you could tell this story with these characters if you would just adjust a couple of things. It wouldn't even cost you more money. It'd be the same number of scenes. Anyway, we do get more scenes to properly bring Makoto into the fold, and the Persona Awakenings continue to look so good. I like them so much. We get a nice apology scene between Ann and Makoto because it was cheap drama to begin with, all wrapped up nice with a bow the moment Makoto is officially on our side. Hand waved and forgotten immediately. But what about Kaneshiro? Isn't he supposed to be the target in this arc? Why have I only talked about him twice in this entire video? That's easy. It's because he is not at all important. He's a mafia boss who craves money. How original. His palace is a bank in which you can see that he views everyone around him as a way to make money. We already knew that. His assigned sin is gluttony, which is one of the trickier sins because of how it's related to food. It's specifically related to humans' relationship with food, which, yes, is a thing we need to live. Gluttony as a sin, though, is typically considered a sin when someone's love of food greatly extends their need of it in an unhealthy way. Basically, if it causes severe health risks or severe financial risks if you get food that is too luxurious for your wallet. It's also typically associated with people consuming good or luxurious foods specifically to fill a hole in themselves or to feel better about themselves. Basically becoming reliant on food to be happy. That's usually when it's also considered a sin to like food this much. Basically, if one uses food to kind of tie into their self-worth in some kind of way, or again, is just overindulgent. But the Atlas team is using it to kind of work with his obsession with gaining money, because they're showing that he always wants more money, and specifically so that he can buy women, possessions, henchmen, so on and so forth. However, it doesn't quite work here for a number of reasons. One, again, the actual sin of gluttony is about food and drink. But also in the last arc, we had someone very similar, even though he was assigned to a different sin. And the one before had that nice thematic through line of, you know, how he's perceived as this nice old man, but he's actually a money-hungry person. This one doesn't really have a good thematic through line. Kaneshiro has no real relationship with Makoto. He just wants to get to Sae, and he wants to use Makoto's fall from grace, I guess, to accomplish that goal. And even then, it doesn't really make sense how that would work. This might be a Japan culture thing that I'm just not understanding. Sae never even meets Kaneshiro on screen, so he has no relationship with her either. I'm not really sure why he wants to get close to Sae, because the two of them don't have a relationship of any kind. He also doesn't have any prior relationship with any of the other Phantom Thieves. He's just a mafia boss. And the mafia specifically has been in decline in Japan for a while, at least the past 5 years or so, 5 to 10 years. Now, I'm not about to deny that it exists. It definitely does. It's never going to go away. All societies have an underbelly, and the Japanese mafia is one of those things. And one of the tricks they generally use is to offer girls from poor areas or impoverished girls a good paying job in order to get them into sex work. Like, they try and offer them this nice, safe, easy job, but then when they actually get to where they need to go, they're forced into sex work because they gave up everything to get there. It's also extremely common for them to do drug trafficking. But Kaneshiro isn't really playing with anything that isn't just underworld standard. And even in terms of what he brings to the overall plot about, someone using the metaverse for evil ends, is just reiterating what Madarame already said. You don't gain new useful information when you defeat him. He just tells you that, yes, in fact, someone is doing the thing that you thought they were doing in Madarame's arc. It's just a confirmation. It's nothing new. The player doesn't even get to see his change of heart. It's done entirely through text boxes and siren sounds on the standard night loading screen. Remember that the change of heart scene is the player's reward to show that their efforts in the palaces are recognized by the game. So it sucks that we don't actually get to see that. But at least we get to see Sae and Akechi's reaction to it. That's nice, I guess. Now, to check in on what the player knows by the end of this arc, if paying attention. The player knows who the main antagonist is, who their main accomplices are, a general idea of what they're doing and why they're doing it. That is most of the main antagonist's plan laid out by the end of the third act out of 7. We're not even at the midway point yet. I have no real opinions on this fact, but it does mean that a player who has figured these things out now will be far less surprised by later plot events than someone who hasn't figured out these things by now. You can decide if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I tend to not be surprised by a lot of plot points in modern video games, so for me, that's standard, but some people may derive value from that surprise value that I just don't. Again, that's an individual thing. I'm not going to say if it's good or bad or not. That's up for you. Back to the story again. I still just love how upset Sae gets about Makoto's involvement. We saw a lot of her flaws on full display in this arc, but it's also clear that she does care about her sister, despite how she feels about her situation that she's in. And she's not a fan of the possibility that her sister was possibly on the run from the police when you got captured. I also like the fact that our character still refuses to give Sae confirmation about Makoto, even though she 100% knows that it's Makoto. She knows. She just does. And we still won't give it to her. We're still just oh, well, you can go ask her yourself if she's involved, we have the option to sass her, or to say nothing, of course. But the real important thing is that finally, Sae has a point of reference to compare her experience with. This is a connection point between Sae and the main character, Makoto. This is Makoto's role in this story. This helps her believe that we might be telling the truth. This is the point where she begins to approach this conversation in good faith. It's no longer just about getting a confession from the main character and then prosecuting him. She actually wants to know what's been happening around her for maybe a year, could be longer, but a while. This shift is further emphasized by her saying, "We're running out of time." The use of "we" is the notable part here, because that word is typically used for people aligned with the person using it. And we know that she prioritizes her own advancement over most things. So she is more likely to use the word "I" instead of "we", generally speaking. But she does set us up right away for the Medjed arc. There's no in-between here, but we will talk about that arc in the next analysis video. If you want to catch that, please subscribe. If you liked it, go ahead and leave a like. Have a good day, everybody. Bye.